As great as the end of the school year is, there's nothing quite like the celebrations that come after finals week wraps up. After high school, my friend group scattered to colleges all across the state and beyond, and I was no different. My school was a solid 8 hours from my hometown, 2 states over. After weeks of exams, all I could think about was getting back home, seeing my people again, and most importantly, having a good time. We had already been planning this massive get-together at my buddy Logan's place. His family owned this enormous house, out in the middle of nowhere, complete with a pool, a sprawling backyard with a fire pit, and more than enough space for people to crash. It was the perfect setup for a big party, especially since his parents happened to be heading out of town that first weekend we'd all be back. It genuinely felt like the universe was working in our favor. Before things got going, I met up with Logan and a couple of other friends. We hit up the mall, grabbed some food, and caught each other up on our first year away. To be more honest about it, we mostly traded stories about the social scenes at our respective schools. As we talked, the conversation shifted to how we could take this party to the next level. What could we do to make it truly memorable? Logan threw out the idea of making it a costume party. It seemed a little out of place for late May, but since we had all missed Halloween being away at school, this would be our version of it. It didn't take long for everyone to get on board. Right. We got the word out and told people to throw together a costume if they could manage it on short notice. The response was overwhelmingly positive. I even posted something on Instagram so my college friends could see I was just as much of a mess at home as I was at school. Okay? We tracked down some candy corn at a nearby grocery store, and that was pretty much the full extent of our Halloween decorations. We all pulled together last-minute costumes and waited for people to start arriving. Yep, I dug up an old plastic hockey mask from the basement and went as Casey Jones. People started rolling in around 10 that night, drinks in hand and wearing all kinds of improvised outfits. The Purge films were really popular around that time, so a lot of the girls showed up in Purge-inspired looks. Before long, the party had completely taken on a life of its own. Like most of our gatherings, way more people showed up than we had actually invited. Since Logan's parents were away, and the nearest neighbors were far enough not to be a concern, he just kept letting people in without a second thought. Yep, I genuinely lost count of how many people were there. And with everyone in costumes, I could barely recognize anyone beyond my closest friends. A few hours in, I was out on the back deck, entertaining people with some exaggerated stories. At some point, I looked up and spotted a girl through the sliding glass door. She was inside the house, wearing one of those ornate masquerade masks, and it looked like she was watching me. I gave a little wave, and she waved back. She was standing by herself, holding a red cup. I asked the people around me if anyone knew who she was, but nobody had a clue. I headed inside to go introduce myself, but as I got closer, she slipped away further into the house. By the time I made it inside, she had completely disappeared. I did a quick scan of the room, but couldn't find her anywhere. I wasn't sure if she was intentionally messing with me, or if it was just a coincidence, but I didn't want to come off as weird, so I headed back outside. Time passed, and I didn't catch another glimpse of her. Every so often I'd scan the crowd hoping to spot that mask, but nothing. It was a couple of hours before I saw her again. I had jumped into the pool at some point, still wearing my mask, just goofing around. While I was in the water, I looked toward the back of the yard and saw her walking alone in the direction of the tree line. Logan's yard had no fence, just a wide open stretch of grass that eventually gave way to a patch of woods. I called out toward her a few times, but she didn't seem to hear me. It didn't help that I had no idea what her name was, so I was essentially just shouting nonsense in her direction. When she reached the edge of the trees, she paused and looked back at me. Then she waved again. I pulled myself out of the pool. I glanced around just to make sure she was actually waving at me, and she clearly was. Even from that distance, the gold mask caught the light and stood out. While I was waving back, she motioned for me to come follow her into the woods. I didn't think twice. I took off, running toward the tree line. She was far enough ahead that by the time I got there, she was already gone from view. To give you a sense of the distance, standing at the edge of the trees, the music from the party was barely audible. I stood there saying things like, "Hello, and are you out here?" I still didn't want to seem like I was chasing her, even though she had literally just waved me over. I squinted into the darkness, trying to catch the shine of gold off her mask. After a couple of minutes with no response, I told her I was heading back, because I was absolutely freezing. I had jumped out of the pool and sprinted over without grabbing a towel, a shirt, or anything else. There I was, standing at the edge of a dark forest in a bathing suit and a plastic mask, soaking wet and shivering. I had been so caught up in the moment that I hadn't even noticed the cold until then. As I turned to head back to the party, I heard her voice, softly. She said, "Don't go back yet. Come find me first." That was enough for me. I turned back around and started searching the darkness again. I kept telling her I couldn't see a thing. Then I heard a branch snap off to my left, but her voice came from my right. She said she was just over there. She started being playful about it, telling me I looked freezing and that she could help with that. I know that's not exactly a classic line, but in that moment, it worked on me completely. I stepped into the forest, moving in the direction of her voice. A few feet in, I spotted something on the ground. It was her mask. I picked it up and kept walking. Whatever strange little game we were playing, I was fully locked in. I had completely forgotten about the cold. And then I finally saw her standing a few feet ahead. The darkness made it hard to make out her face. She had on a white tank top, black shorts, and her dark hair was hanging loosely down over her face. Yuti. My brilliant opening line was that I had found her mask. She laughed and thanked me, then asked if I could bring it over to her. I started walking in her direction, and she didn't move at all, didn't even reach out to take it. The closer I got, the more I noticed her head was slightly tilted down, her hair still covering most of her face. I reached out to hand her the mask and introduced myself as Kip. That's when she said, "I already know who you are." The voice was familiar. I knew I recognized it, but I couldn't immediately place it. I assumed she must have been someone from my high school. When I was just inches away, she finally raised her head, and I recognized her instantly. She was a friend of a girl I had briefly dated during my first year of college. My college, remember, was 8 hours away. What on earth was she doing here? And she took a step back, and that's when I heard it. Branches snapping to my left. I turned to look, and before I could react, my ex-girlfriend was charging straight at me, holding a metal baseball bat. She swung it directly at my head. I dropped to the ground, and somehow she missed. I heard her scream, and then she brought it down again in an overhead swing that also missed. I got up and ran. That was the only thought in my head. I sprinted the entire way back to the party, screaming that there were people in the woods. That killed the mood instantly. I was soaked, shaking, and running purely on adrenaline. Logan cleared the house out, except for the few of us who were spending the night, but he flat out refused to call the police. He didn't want any trouble over the party. I obviously wasn't in any shape to drive, but I was scared out of my mind the entire night. I made sure every door and window in the house was locked. I sat by the back windows, watching the tree line for hours, but couldn't make anything out in the dark from that distance. The moment the sky started getting light, I got in my car and drove home. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. This girl had driven 8 hours to come after me, and possibly with far worse intentions than just swinging a bat. I had no idea I had that kind of impact on her. We had only dated for a few weeks, and I ended things because something about her felt off from early on. She was constantly asking to go through my phone and my email. She'd show up in my dorm room after class and question me if I was even a couple of minutes later than usual. It was just way too intense for something that had barely gotten started. I thought my decision to end things had been pretty low-key. Clearly, it had not been. I spent the rest of that summer hyper-aware of my surroundings. Any girl who even slightly reminded me of her, and I was already heading for the exit. I can honestly say that experience changed me, even if not in the way she intended. I cut back on drinking and stopped chasing the party lifestyle after that night. She never returned to that college the following fall, and I never crossed paths with her again. For a while I kept tabs on her through social media, but eventually her accounts disappeared entirely. Be thoughtful about how you treat people. Something that feels like no big deal to you can land in an entirely different way for someone else. I truly cannot get inside the headspace of someone who would drive that far and show up with a weapon. If that bat had connected, I genuinely don't think I'd be here writing this today.